The goodbye message that shatters every avoidant. There is a goodbye message that doesn't beg, doesn't threaten, doesn't accuse, and doesn't explain itself to death. And yet it hits an avoidant harder than any emotional confrontation ever could. Not because it's cruel, but because it removes the one thing an avoidant secretly relies on to feel safe. Your emotional availability without commitment. Most people think avoidants shut down because they don't care. That's not true. Avoidance shut down because caring feels dangerous. And when you leave in the wrong way, angry, pleading, dramatic, you confirm their deepest belief that closeness equals chaos. But when you leave in the right way, something inside them fractures. Not violently, quietly, permanently. The mistake most people make when saying goodbye to an avoidant is trying to be understood. They write long messages explaining their pain, listing the inconsistencies, pointing out the mixed signals, hoping that clarity will suddenly awaken empathy. But avoidants don't respond to emotional logic. They respond to emotional safety. And paradoxically, nothing feels less safe to them than someone trying to pull closeness out of them. The more you explain, the more they emotionally retreat. The more you justify, the more they detach. What they actually feel relief from is distance. And what terrifies them is realizing that distance no longer protects them from loss. This is why the goodbye message that shatters an avoidant is not dramatic. It's calm. It's self-contained. It carries no demand. It doesn't ask for reassurance. It doesn't invite debate. It doesn't leave the door cracked open just in case. It sounds emotionally resolved. And that is precisely what destabilizes them. Because avoidants are comfortable when they feel in control of the emotional temperature. They pull away, you chase. They go silent, you explain. They delay commitment, you wait. But the moment you remove yourself without emotional collapse, the entire dynamic flips. The goodbye message that truly shatters an avoidant carries a very specific energy. It says without saying it directly, I see you clearly. I accept who you are, and I am choosing myself anyway. That sentence alone violates the avoidant's internal script. They expect either compliance or chaos, never quiet self-respect. They expect you to either stay and suffer silently or leave loudly. When you do neither, their nervous system doesn't know how to categorize the loss. And when the loss cannot be categorized, it lingers. This kind of goodbye doesn't accuse them of being avoidant. It doesn't label their behavior. It doesn't try to diagnose them. It simply states a truth, that the connection no longer aligns with your emotional needs. And then it ends. No emotional hooks. No, maybe someday. No, I'll always be here. That's what makes it unbearable. Because avoidants rely on the idea that you are emotionally available even when they are not. The goodbye message that shatters them removes that safety net. What truly shakes an avoidant is realizing they didn't lose you because they were misunderstood, but because they were understood perfectly. You didn't leave out of confusion. You didn't leave out of insecurity. You left out of clarity. And clarity is confronting. When an avoidant realizes that someone saw their patterns, accepted their limitations, and still chose to walk away peacefully, it bypasses their defenses. There is no argument to win, no accusation to refute, no emotional fire to extinguish, only absence. This is where the psychological impact deepens. Avoidants are experts at emotional compartmentalization. They push feelings down. They distract themselves. They rationalize distance. But unresolved loss does not disappear. It waits. And the goodbye message that shatters them creates unresolved loss. Because you didn't collapse. You didn't demand change. You didn't make yourself smaller to stay. You simply exited with dignity. And dignity is unsettling to someone who equates closeness with emotional risk. Over time, this message replays in their mind. Not the words, but the tone. The emotional neutrality. The absence of blame. The sense that you were solid without them. That is what activates delayed grief and avoidance. Not immediately. Often weeks or months later. When the distractions fade. When the dating apps feel empty. When they realize no one else offers connection without pressure the way you did. And suddenly the silence they once craved becomes loud. The goodbye message that shatters an avoidant also removes their ability to re-enter casually. Many avoidants return not because they want deep connection, but because they want emotional familiarity without obligation. They test the waters. They send a casual, "Hey." They check if you're still emotionally accessible. But when your goodbye was clean and self-contained, there is no emotional opening to slip through. And that's when panic can quietly surface. Not dramatic panic, but a subtle loss of control. This is important to understand. Avoidants fear being needed, but they also fear being irrelevant. When you leave calmly, without resentment, without chasing, without leaving emotional debris behind, you become psychologically unavailable. Not because you're cold, but because you're complete. And completeness is threatening to someone who survives through emotional distance. They begin to wonder whether they misjudged you, whether they lost something rare, whether their avoidance cost them more than they admitted. And here's the part most people don't expect. This goodbye doesn't just affect how they feel about you, it forces them to feel themselves. Avoidants spend a lifetime avoiding internal discomfort. Your calm exit becomes a mirror. It reflects their emotional limitations without attacking them. It asks no questions, yet raises many. And those questions don't scream. They whisper. They follow them into quiet moments, into late nights, into failed connections that don't feel the same. The reason this goodbye is so powerful is because it restores your power without trying to take theirs. There is no emotional tug of war, no attempt to make them feel guilty. And that's what makes it heavy, because guilt can be defended against. Calm acceptance cannot. You didn't say, "You hurt me and you need to fix this." You said energetically, "This no longer works for me," and that's enough. And for an avoidant, that sentence lands like an emotional full stop. Many people worry that leaving this way means the avoidant won't care, that they'll move on easily. But that belief comes from misunderstanding avoidant attachment. Avoidants don't process loss immediately. They delay it. They suppress it. They intellectualize it. And then one day, when there is nothing left to suppress it with, it arrives fully formed. Not as longing necessarily, but as regret, curiosity, and unresolved emotion, especially when the person they lost didn't self-destruct. This goodbye also rewrites your identity in their mind. Instead of being remembered as too emotional, too demanding, or too sensitive, you become the one who walked away without drama, the one who didn't beg, the one who didn't chase, the one who chose self-respect over proximity. And that identity is haunting because it contradicts the avoidance belief that emotional closeness is inherently unstable. You prove that emotional maturity can exist, even in separation. And whether they ever reach out again or not becomes irrelevant. Because the true power of this goodbye is not what it does to them, it's what it does to you. It closes the loop. It returns your nervous system to safety. It ends the cycle of overthinking and emotional bargaining. It allows you to grieve without humiliation, to heal without self-betrayal. And ironically, that internal shift is what makes the goodbye permanent in their psyche. If an avoidant does come back after this kind of goodbye, it's different. There is no casual tone, no breadcrumbing, no half-hearted check-in, because they sense that access has changed. They feel that you are no longer waiting to be chosen, and that alone forces them to confront something they spend their lives avoiding, the cost of emotional distance, not through punishment, but through consequence. So the goodbye message that shatters every avoidant is not a message at all. It's an emotional stance. It's the moment you stop trying to be understood and start standing in self-truth. It's when you leave without bitterness, without superiority, without collapse. It's when you choose peace over possibility. And for someone who equates attachment with danger, watching you walk away grounded is more unsettling than any argument could ever be. Because the one thing an avoidant cannot regulate is the loss of someone who didn't lose themselves trying to love them. And that goodbye echoes far longer than any words ever could.